All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to have you with me this day. And also so happy to have Arlen Grossman back after a 1 week disappearance, I guess is fair to say. Good morning or hello. I'm just going to say hello, Arlen. How are you? It isn't even morning where we are now anyway.
Yeah, well, I had to take some sick leave, but I'm back and raring to go. Although it's kind of interesting to me, Hal, that the kind of stories we're going to be talking about are going to be the same ones that we've been talking about for weeks. It's like they all change a little bit, but it's basically the same ones. I mean, the Middle East, the Congress, the speakership, and Donald Trump's legal problems. So those seem to be the big stories, and they've been the big stories for a long time.
Yeah, no question about it. And the first, as you mentioned, we'll talk about Israel-Palestine, and I've been very focused on that. You actually raised the issue of this column where we see the headline there by Tom Friedman, perhaps the preeminent foreign policy columnist in the world, not just the New York Times. I understand his column is read everywhere and very, very influential. So you brought this to my attention. Why did you want to talk about and really kind of delve into, and I hope I got the most important, headlines, or I took the most important nuggets out of this piece. Why was it important to you to discuss, Arlen?
Well, you can look at the headline and see Israel's about to make a terrible mistake. That sounds rather ominous. But the thing about Tom Friedman is really been concentrating and focusing on the Middle East. He's not talking about anything else of late. And it's interesting the way he ends his most recent column. He says, "The hour is late. I've never written a column this urgent before because I've never been more worried about how this situation could spin out of control in ways that could damage Israel irreparably, damage U.S. interests irreparably, damage Palestinians irreparably, threaten Jews everywhere, and destabilize the whole world." So, Friedman's very worried, and he ought to be, because there's a lot of things that could go very wrong.
No question about that, Arlen. I think we got the quote up there as you were reading it, so folks can see this. And there you go. One thing I often have issues with what Tom Friedman has to say, but what I would just get to is it doesn't appear to me that the Israelis are listening to Tom Friedman. What he's basically saying is don't give in to what he calls your understandable, and I don't think it's so understandable, but he sees it as an understandable reaction, right, to the attack by Hamas, where I guess 1,000 or so, was it over 1,000, somewhere in the 1,000 neighborhood, very, very large number of Israelis were killed by Hamas, and he says, to Israel, don't give in to your understandable desire for revenge. And I guess where I don't really get that, Arlen, is this understandable. I mean, Israel's the country that's done to my way. I don't, and it's not just to my way of thinking. I don't know. I always just go by the numbers. I try to always just use whatever are the appropriate metrics. I don't see how one can look at what Israel's done to the Palestinians and think there's any proportionality there. Israel is the oppressor as I see it. So why should Israel be so understandably enraged that finally at some point some of the people they're oppressing have responded violently to them?
Well, all Israel is thinking about that attack that just happened that was very grotesque, very very violent, and severe. And it's kind of like our 9/11. When we experienced 9/11, we felt that was, everybody was under it, was attacking us. And that's the way Israel feels now. They think their number one priority is protect themselves and protect themselves from another attack of that kind. So they're not thinking all the way about Palestine and how they've treated the Palestinians and all that. They should, but they don't. And also, yeah. Well, and also Netanyahu's got this big problem of having a government that has some very far right uh, type politicians, Orthodox and all that, they're demanding revenge. And he's got to appease them as well as appease, the Americans and others who don't want to see a massacre in Gaza.
I mean, this column came out 4 days ago, I believe, is the dateline, October 19th. And since then, we've seen more reprisals by Israel. We've seen more deaths, more killing on the West Bank. So let me see if I can get that. Here we go. This is from Al Jazeera today. And we've got 5,000 dead, including in Gaza, half of them children, Arlen. And according to Al Jazeera, just the past 24 hours, we've seen 400 more killed. So it doesn't seem like Israel's paying any attention, as far as I can tell, to what Thomas Friedman is saying.
Well, it could be a lot worse. They could go on in there and just decimate the entire region of Gaza, and they're not doing that, but they are continuing to, they brought up all those reservists and they want to see something done. So I think that's what they're doing. They're doing what they can without going all out. So it's a tough position. I don't know. And none of us really know exactly what they're thinking, what the Israeli government is thinking, because are they going to go, 100% in there and try to destroy Hamas and all the rest of the country, or are they going to be a little bit more careful and measured? So nobody really knows for sure what they're thinking.
How could they be less measured? I mean, again, they're just, I guess it just is always one's perceptions change. The images are so horrific. There's a mom, 40% of the 5,087 people killed are children. And there were more than 300 new air attacks within 24 hours. More than 400 people killed in that period. So again, I'm kind of the mind, well, I get what you're saying. They could launch a ground invasion, but the only reason it seems they're not doing that is because Israel's not doing that, Arlen, is because of they fear that it could hurt them, not because they have any concern whatsoever with Palestinian life.
Well, yeah, it's always going to look bad, any kind of invasion, any kind of, destruction of cities and all that. There be some horrible pictures, and the other side's going to exploit them for sure. So, yeah, so Israel is definitely fighting back, but they're doing it in a measured way, I think, and they could go all out, and that would be much worse for the situation. And then you have to worry about Hezbollah and Iran and everybody else that has stakes in that area.
We're seeing Hezbollah launching some attacks already. And from what I understand, Hezbollah and Iran do not want a hot war with Israel, but many of their supporters are so enraged by what Israel is doing that just as the Israeli hardliners are incapable of seeing, anyone but themselves and their own pain, I guess, that they're feeling from when Hamas responded to the decades of oppression of the Palestinians. Now the Hezbollah militants are saying we can't allow this. We cannot let Israel just bomb civilians, including 40% of whom are kids. We can't allow that without responding. I think that's something Israel seems, for whatever reason, doesn't care about or isn't recognized.
I get the impression that all the sides are trying to test their limits. Iran, Hezbollah, Israel, they want to see how far they could go without blowing up the entire Middle East. And, so far they've kept enough restraint that this hasn't happened yet. But they all have to be very, very careful, as Tom Friedman is very concerned about, that this could blow up into something that can't be stopped, and we don't want that.
Aren't we at a point now, Arlen, where at least for the Palestinians, and he says that without a two-state solution, which I do not support. I support a one-state solution. I don't know how a two-state solution could possibly work at this point. But he says, and we can address that, Friedman says that if we don't do it now, if Israel doesn't pull back from what others have called an orgy of violence, the Palestinians will be damaged irreparably. Haven't they already been damaged irreparably? I don't know how much worse. I guess there could be a full-on genocide, right? That would be the way it would be even worse. But they're living in dire poverty in a tiny strip. It's like a concentration camp. How much worse could things get for them besides just being completely annihilated?
Well, yeah, there you go. Completely annihilated. I mean, things could always get worse. There could always be more military action by Israel and everybody else who will react if Israel reacts. So it's very tricky. I don't know what the answer is, what Israel wants to do, and Israel has to think about, make sure that they're okay with the Biden government. The Biden government has a lot of power over the purse strings, so they can't upset Joe Biden and the U.S. government. So they're stuck in a difficult position, and I hope they choose wisely.
All right, Arlen Grossman with Hal on Halitics. Please click like, please click subscribe, bottom right corner. And we're going through a topic that I've been very focused on, the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I know, Arlen, you think I've been a little too hard, I guess, on Biden in this case, maybe on Israel as well. We had a comment from Michael saying that I have misled viewers. I don't have the comment here. I should have be able to click on it because of my discussion of the bombing of the hospital in Gaza last week. But to defend myself, I think I was very clear that that bombing has not been conclusively attributed to Israel. In fact, it appears at this point it's more likely that the missile that hit the parking lot, the hospital itself, I don't think was damaged, but it wasn't hit directly, was more likely friendly fire. In other words, coming from the Hamas. So I just want to be very, very clear. My beef with Israel is for many, many things they've done, but I'm not directly attributing what happened to that hospital to an Israeli missile or bomb. I do say, though, that if Israel hadn't retaliated in the fashion it did, then Hamas wouldn't have launched a missile that apparently misfired and hit that hospital. So I still blame Israel indirectly for what's going on in there as well. Is Biden handling this correctly? I mean, you say I'm too hard on Biden, but I would say that my biggest concern about Biden is that he has been too deferential to the Israelis. Do you disagree with that?
I think he's doing the right thing and saying the right thing. I mean, we've always been pro-Israel and will always remain pro-Israel and make sure that Israel is, protected from being, destroyed by the other side. So, he's just trying to keep a lid on everything, trying to get the people of this country to, make sure they're backing Israel as well as Ukraine. And, I think he's done as well as he could do, but you can't satisfy everybody. And certainly Joe Biden can't, and I don't know who can.
So we're getting a little bit of bad video from you, Arlen. I actually turned off your video for the moment. I don't know if you can adjust that in settings. You may be able, if you click on settings, to go to the send resolution and go to high def if you have that. I hate to be giving, tech instructions during the call, but we're using a new system and it's worked out very well, but the quality hasn't always been as good as we'd like. So I'm just hoping we can get just a little clearer shot of Arlen, but I'm going to go back to him right now. I guess what I would have hoped Biden would do is condition further aid to Israel. And you said we should be supporting Israel, but I don't, like, I was talking to my wife, and of course we're Jewish, and we don't support Israel. I don't support what Israel's doing. I hope the country survives. I don't want the country annihilated by any means. That would be awful. It would be terrible. But I don't support the way they treat the Palestinians. I think it's just reprehensible. I don't know how it, help me understand that, Arlen. Maybe you don't see it as bad as I do.
No, it is bad, and I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of government that Israel has right now. You got Netanyahu, who depends on these far-right, ultra-religious groups, because for one thing, he could get implicated in some court action that would, he could get into a lot of trouble, but they're keeping him, I guess, protecting him from that. So he's got to appease them, and he's also has to, appease the whole world and not overdo things. So, you can't forget that Israel, this thing that precipitated this latest onslaught was Hamas, attacking Israel, being very brutal, and just attacking citizens everywhere. That's what started it. Israel has to respond. And so the question is, how far do they respond without overdoing it? And it's a delicate position to be in, I think.
Well, why does Israel have to respond with bombs? Why can't Israel respond by taking its foot off the throat of the Palestinian people?
Ideally, yeah. But think of what would happen after 9/11 if we said, well, we're not going to attack anybody. We're just going to, hope for the best. People demanded that the American government do something. And they didn't do something. They did the wrong things, but they did respond.
I mean, they made us less safe. They destroyed Iraq, which was one of the more moderate Arab countries, and wasn't even involved. So in 9/11. So, I mean, I think people get what, well, let me ask you this, Arlen. Why we're doing the wrong thing so frequently. So you can see this, although a few trucks carrying aid for the embattled Gazans have finally made it through, some Red Crescent trucks. 2 weeks after the Israeli assault, almost 2 weeks after the Israeli assault began, or just 2 weeks after. On the other hand, our American weapons began arriving in Israel, including smart bombs and ammo to kill Palestinians. Those came right away. There was no delay. There was no holdup. Is that, and let me just be real pointed, is that because of this? Is that because of the boom to weapons makers and the profits that even some Congress members are making from their stock holdings? I mean, is this war being fought to benefit companies that contribute to lawmakers and to benefit the lawmakers themselves? Is it fair to be that cynical? Or am I going too far, Arlen?
I think you might be going too far. I don't think that's the main reason we're doing what we're doing, but it's certainly the weapons manufacturers always benefit from things like this and always will. Of course, Congress doesn't have much say in it because Congress can't do anything, especially on the House side. I mean, they are pretty much unable to have any kind of influence over anything. So. Yeah, it's, I too agree with you that it would be better if Israel treated the Palestinians, much better than they do. They haven't, and I wish they would. But, in any event, there's going to be people angry on all sides, and people will want to do different things. So, we just have to strike a delicate point and hope that it doesn't lead to a wider war, which would be the worst thing of all.
Arlen, would you support Biden saying to Israel, we will not, I'm going to hold up our arms to you until you stop the bombing completely?
No, I think Israel has to respond to the Hamas attack. And, they can't get away with not doing it. The people in their government and a lot of the people of Israel, would not accept just sitting back and not doing anything. So they have to do something, but they don't have to do anything extreme. And I hope they don't. I hope they do this very carefully. I think Tom Friedman was saying, that their focus has to be on the hostages. Get the hostages out, not so much on destroying Hamas, because if they do that, then there's going to be more people killed and more, things like that happening. But if they focus on the hostages, which is difficult, maybe less people will be killed.
All right, you're watching Halitics. By the way, call in. Phones are open, 240-363-7190. Would love to hear from you, 240-363-7190. There's a good deal of anger in Israel, as I understand it, Arlen, towards Netanyahu and the government for failing to keep Israel safe. Why can't the response be, we're going to do a better job of providing security, including reducing the conditions that caused the attacks? It seems to me that would be a smarter way, and I think also people would accept it. I understand there's a lot of anger, but in the end, people want to be safe, right? And this, without question, is not making anyone safe.
No, it's not. And I'd like to see the U.S. get involved and try to, fix some of these ongoing problems that haven't been really taken care of at all, like, Gaza and the West Bank and all the other parts of, that there's Palestinians who just have no power and are oppressed. So, I don't know how they're going to do it, but do
you think, and last question on before I want to play this clip just real quick of these Red Crescent trucks, a little bit of good news. This is from Saturday. So just starting in, remember the weapons got to Israel right after the attacks. The Red Crescent trucks finally are entering Gaza. Do you think the Israeli populace deserves blame for, at least some of the blame, for failing to elect a much more moderate, more peaceful government? The Israelis argue, we hear it all the time, it's the fault of Gaza. There's no innocent Gazans. They're collectively guilty. They should have risen up against Hamas. They elected Hamas in 2007, and they've never said, we're going to get rid of you, Hamas. So if Israel can say that it's Hamas's fault, that the Gazans are getting just what they deserve, the 5,000 Gazans killed so far, the 40% of whom 2,000 are kids, they're getting just what they deserve because they never took on Hamas, then is it fair to say that Israel's getting what it deserves because they keep electing Netanyahu and Likud and extremists who are hell-bent on colonizing the West Bank and oppress and keeping the Gazans in basically an open-air prison?
Well, Israel is kind of like our country. They're divided in half. You have, those who support Netanyahu, and then when he tried to change the Supreme Court, then you had, tens of thousands of people in the streets protesting. So there's a lot of distrust and a lot of dislike for Netanyahu. In fact, I think I read recently, like in the last day or so, 58% of the Israelis think Netanyahu should go after this fighting ends. So he's not going to be able to keep his job for any long time, I don't think, based on the fact that he let the attack happen and precipitated so much of this with his rigid views.
Right, but I guess it still comes down to is there collective guilt just, I mean, are the Palestinians collectively guilty and therefore getting what they deserve from Israel? Or should we say to Israel, no, what you're doing is absolutely wrong. We can't support it. We're not going to support you. Just as Israel says that Hamas should have, precipitated a revolt by the Palestinians against it.
Well, you could make a case that everybody is wrong to some extent, with the exception of the people in Gaza who don't, are just civilians who are hoping to make a decent life and haven't been given that chance. But there's blame to go around everywhere, I think, and it just depends on where you're sitting or standing as to who you blame the most. But at the very least, we've got to keep a lid on this and not go to any extreme, by attacking Gaza, too harshly and, making things so much worse. So, but there's blame to go around everywhere, Hal.
All right, here's the video from Al Jazeera I want to play for folks.
Breaking news now. This is a live picture of the Rafah crossing where the first aid trucks are finally making their way from the Egyptian side of the crossing into Gaza, where they will be inspected. We're going to bring in James Bays, our diplomatic editor, once again. James, can you just talk us through what it has taken to get to this point for aid, what it looks like now to finally get into Gaza?
Well, a great deal of diplomatic negotiations to see these pictures. This is where the UN Secretary General made his appeal 24 hours ago at that crossing, to see these pictures of the trucks heading from the Egyptian side of Rafah and into Gaza. You see on the side of those trucks, it says Egyptian Red Crescent. This is it is that body that is carrying out this first convoy. There are UN convoys waiting to go. I'm hearing from UN sources they are more likely, though, to have to wait until probably Monday. Also hearing from sources within Gaza, from the health ministry, what might be on this first tranche of 20 trucks. Well, the UN and the Red Crescent.
So I'll stop it there, Arlen, but I think it's important to note that the UN said as early as Wednesday of last week that the 20 trucks would not be sufficient, that the needs are so great in Gaza because of the Israeli bombardment and because of the Israeli, occupation, really. That
and cutting off,
and they're cutting off, and they continue the aerial assault. So it's way too little, too late. Of course, better that they come in and some people get help, but I'm just going to reiterate. I believe the U.S. has to tell Israel that we are the only country that has the ability to do it. Tell Israel, no, we provide you with nothing until this ends. That would be what I would say to Israel. Nothing until this is over.
Well, if you're saying, if they stop bombing and everything, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if they at least make some signs that they're thinking of, a peace process that's going to be, worthwhile and save people's lives, if Israel can show that they're doing that, then that would help a lot. And if they're not, then we could threaten to cut off some of their aid, or much of their aid.
Well, I would just cut it. I wouldn't threaten. I would just do it. I don't believe in threats. I just believe in taking action when we see these kinds of catastrophes. You make a great point, Arlen. I was interested in the fact that you have Congress members profiting from this war and how awful it is. And how I believe it makes it more difficult to end it, right? Because if people like, here you have Senator, two Congress members, one is Senator, one from Oklahoma, both Republicans, Mark Wayne Mullen here, buying Raytheon stock on September 13th. And then following up with that, you have Kevin Hearn, who is another Republican from Oklahoma, also buying shares of Raytheon. And then you have a Democrat as well. So it is bipartisan Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey buying shares of Northrop Grumman. So when these Congress members make a conscious decision knowing a lot more than we do, with a lot more insider information, that it makes sense to buy these defense industry stocks, it's both a war profiteering, which I just think is ugly and somewhat, morbid. But beyond that, I would make the case it makes it much harder to extricate ourselves from these wars, because the government, the ones who are making the decisions whether to provide military aid, military material, have a direct financial stake in more government contracts with companies like Northrop Grumman and Raytheon. So that is very, very scary, very, very undemocratic, right? I mean, we don't live in a democracy either if our representatives are profiting from the war. But you did make a great point, which is, well, they don't even get to do anything because they don't have a House Speaker at this point. By the way, your video is terrible, Arlen. I don't know. You're going to need to plug in your. I'm going to go back to just Al because I don't want to show people that those pixels.
You can cut me off.
I will do that, but I'd love to see. Yeah, we'll talk about how to do that better. Yeah. So your thoughts? I mean, what? Representative Ro Khanna and Matt Gaetz from Florida, in a bipartisan group, seem to be on the same page that Congress should not be allowed to buy and sell stocks. I assume you would agree with them.
Well, that's a perfect example of what's wrong with our entire political system. The fact that these Congress people can make money off of knowing a lot more than we know, which, is supposed to be something like insider trading. My first thought is maybe Congress should not be allowed to buy stocks and weapons. But the best thing is Congress should put all their money that they're investing in blind trusts so that they can't benefit from what they know.
Yeah, I would agree, because even if you say, well, they can put everything in some kind of index fund, still that does incentivize them to bail out the market, even though when they don't have individual stocks that they'll favor under those circumstances, they still would be incentivized to, say, put billions of dollars into, say, the stock market rather than helping out poor, struggling, and working Americans. So yes, they should have zero knowledge of what their investments are when they're in power. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's a definite, and that included Donald Trump, who was supposed to do the same thing, but it sounds like his kids took over his investments, and probably he knows exactly where all his money is going. So
no question, and he certainly is, and we're going to talk about Trump now and this conviction of this seems to be. And I've been less critical, I think people say this about me all the time, less critical of Trump than they think I should be. I've made excuses for Trump. This is one area where I make no excuses. This is absolutely reprehensible behavior. It's very, very frightening. Refusing to accept a democratic election, and was it a perfect election? No, but there's no cheating. There was certainly no evidence of any kind of cheating, any kind of corruption with the voting machines. I mean, no, as I said, was it a perfect election? No, I'm not saying that but no election's ever perfect. There's always going to be something you can point to legitimately. Trump lost. The majority of voters didn't want him to be president. More people preferred Joe Biden across the country to Trump, and more people in a majority of in a number of states that collectively have more than 50% of the electoral votes, which is how we choose presidents. I think it's a terrible system, but it's what we have. It's better than some. He lost. Trump, you lost. There's no question about it. And you refused to accept it, and you tried to remain in power. That's terrifying. That is fascistic. No argument. This, to me, Arlen, could really be, I don't think it's going to prevent him from getting a majority of votes or a plurality of votes if that's what Americans want to do. I don't think this is going to turn the election against him unless there are some indictments, including against him. This is the evidence is really coming home to him. I don't know what your thoughts are after all my jabbering, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. Everything's piling up. Everything is looking bad for him legally. I mean, there's apparently, people like Jack Smith and Bonnie Willis are doing a great job in not backing down to Trump, and they're moving hard. And right now we have, of course, a situation with Sidney Powell and a couple other people that are doing plea bargains where they're going to start turning against Trump. So it's got to be bad for him, really bad. And I think eventually it'll affect his chances of being president. I just don't see how he's going to win the Republican nomination. I may be in a minority about that, but I don't see it.
Well, I don't see how. I don't think this is going to stop him from winning the nomination unless he somehow withdraws. But I think that could happen, Arlen. I think this could also sway independents against him. So you mentioned, turning witnesses against him. To me, what's most frightening about this story, if you're Trump, is what I highlighted there. Her plea deal, the attorney Sidney Powell, who was Trump's point person in the Peach State there, Georgia, when she was making calls and as well as seizing voting machines. Apparently, they seized several voting machines in Georgia. The president's reelection team seized several voting machines to inspect them illegally. Has also agreed to avoid jail time. You can see that 6 years probation to testify truthfully about any co-defendants. And now, of course, Trump is one of those co-defendants. He was indicted in Georgia. If she doesn't cooperate, Arlen, she's going to face jail time. To me, this has got to be very, very scary for the president's current legal team, of which Sidney Powell was once a member.
Well, there's more than that, Hal. It's going to be scary to those co-defendants with,
Well, she's one of them. He's one of them, isn't he? He's a co-defendant. So that's what I'm saying. But yeah, they can get. The prosecution in Georgia will use this threat to turn other smaller fish against Trump as well, and then they'll have. That's how good prosecutors work. Is they use the small fish to catch the kingpin.
And that's exactly what they're doing. And I think it has to put a lot of pressure on those other defendants. And they're going to have to relent too. I think they're going to have to do just like Sidney Powell, and they're going to have to testify against Trump. And that's just going to hurt him really badly.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's my point. I think. And again, he may, and I don't know. I remember another viewer here made a big deal about Jeff saying, oh, you can't legally, he has a right to run for office. He can't plea and agree not to run. You can plead to whatever you want. He can say, I'm not going to run for office. That seems perfectly legitimate. He has a legal right to run for office, but he also has a legal right not to run for office. So if the prosecutors accept some kind of agreement on his part that he's not going to run or won't accept the nomination, I think they are within their rights to do it. I'm not aware that there's precedent one way or the other on that, Arlen. But I do think that will be a major negotiating point on the prosecution side, which is we would consider waiving jail time if you would plea. And also, if he pleads to a felony, Arlen, then that can be used to keep him off the ballot, meaning Trump.
Well, I don't know if that would keep him off the ballot. I think he would be allowed to have a felony and still be on ballots.
You can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. So clearly, a felony would be the basis. A felony conviction would be the basis for an impeachment. Also, the Constitution does provide, Amendment 14, Section 3, that if you do engage in rebellion against the United States, you are disqualified from office.
Yeah, and several states are trying to do that as well. They should, because it's pretty clear. But I think the only way that Trump is going to not run for president would be if he's promised not to go to prison. They could give him whatever charges they want, but if he doesn't have to go to prison, then that's the only way he'll relent and not run for office, I believe.
Well, I agree. I mean, that could be part of the plea deal too, right? We don't put you in jail, and you don't run for re-election ever. So I think those are certainly possible.
Yeah, I think it's, like I say, that's the only way Trump is going to give up. He really wants to be president again so he could, help himself and all his friends, with pardons and so on. But so he's going to do everything he can to run for president. But, if he has to think of the possibility of going to prison, then that's the only reason that he would say, all right, I'll drop out if you'll, just promise me I don't have to go to prison.
All right, you're watching Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to have you with Arlen and me. And the reason you don't see Arlen is just we're having some issues with his visuals, so we're not showing him. Okay, but you can hear him fine. Go ahead. You got it working. Let me check. Let me see, because I hope we can see Arlen. It's better than just seeing me. 240, by the way, 363-7190. 240-363-7190. You're not looking that crisp. I think what we need to get with Arlen is we're going to wire you. We're going to actually connect your laptop to a cable, which goes into your modem or your router. That would probably be the best solution. But it doesn't look that bad, I guess. All right, 240-363-7190. We've got a few more minutes left. Yes.
I have to admit that I woke up this morning feeling very fuzzy, and I think it stayed that way. So I think it's...
You are fuzzy. I'm giving you that. You're fuzzy. Did we have a third topic? I don't have it here right now, but I thought there was one more topic we were going to get to. Go ahead.
Well, certainly the speakership is a big one. I mean, the Republicans are just, getting nowhere with trying to pick a speaker. And then I think there's maybe 7 or 8 who might be interested. So I think that'll be, something they're going to have to deal with. But right now they don't have any power to do much of anything at all. Well,
why didn't they elect Jim Jordan? I'm sort of curious. I kind of thought he was going to get it, and he sure didn't. So what's that about, Arlen?
Yeah. I think a lot of us worry about that too. But I guess there's enough, a couple dozen Republicans who are, more or less moderate compared to the hardliners, and I guess that's all they needed to block his speakership. So it worked, and he should be, out of it. And they're going to have to come up with somebody a little more moderate. He was pretty extreme.
Did the Democrats make a mistake not backing Kevin McCarthy for speakership? Because he lost by just a few votes, and if 5-10 Dems had crossed over, he would be the speaker.
Yeah, but he's not exactly a great speaker, and he wasn't very good for the Democrats. He pretty much ignored them. So I don't know that McCarthy's any better than, Jim Jordan or some of the other hardliners. But, there's a lot of good moderates that are interested in the job, and, if we could get one of those in there.
Well, who are these good moderates? I'm not aware of them, Arlen. Not to be difficult, but who?
Yeah, that's the thing. Nobody knows who they are really. At least those of us out of the Washington. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't inspected all of them. They all seem reasonably better than the Freedom Caucus type people.
Well, Jamie Raskin has given a few names out there. I played this on Friday. I don't want to replay it, but he brings up Liz Cheney as I guess, moderate, although remember, she defended her dad's torture program where we lost whatever soul we might still have had as a nation. He also brought up Hakeem Jeffries and bragged about how the Democrats are completely united behind Jeffries. I think you and I disagree on this, but I don't want my representative who happens to be Jamie Raskin to be united behind Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries is not, in my view, where I am as a voter, and he's not where I think most American people are either, with his support, strong support for both AIPAC and from AIPAC and for and from Wall Street. So I want to see a Democratic Party that's a little more of a big tent, where there's lots of views that are represented and different people who are more pro-people, pro-peace are candidates and get votes for House leadership.
Yeah, I sort of agree with you. I mean, the Democrats could do a lot better, but certainly Hakeem Jeffries, Liz Cheney, those people will not be speaker because the Republicans would not accept them. So I don't know who they're going to pick, but I assume it's going to be one of those moderates that we just talked about.
You make a good point, Arlen. Neither Cheney nor Jeffries will get one Republican vote. So is Raskin grandstanding, or just, wasting time by going on Meet the Press and talking about how these are the people who should be speaker? Or is there some political savvy behind those statements?
Yeah, I don't know his motivation. He can't decide for the Republicans who they want as speakers, so his power is very limited.
Well, the power they had was to keep McCarthy speaker. That's the power they had. And right. McCarthy, who, would certainly not be to my taste, and I'm not particularly upset by all this what's going on, doesn't really bother me particularly. But, if you want to get things done, as the Democrats always say, I mean, they did get things done. McCarthy did deliver the legislation that Biden wanted, which was to lift the debt ceiling, and basically exactly what the Mountain Valley Pipeline was approved, and at the same time they didn't cut the budget for the Pentagon. So I'm not really clear why he was unacceptable to the Democrats. Now, I wish they had cut the budget for the Pentagon. I think there were some cuts in there. They didn't cut. Maybe they cut some Pentagon spending. They didn't cut entitlement spending. So I'm not clear why McCarthy was unacceptable.
Well, he may have done some stuff early on, but basically he didn't really let the Democrats in to make decisions. He made his own decisions based on he was always worried about the hardliners, that they would knock him off, which they eventually did. So I don't think McCarthy was anybody great that we should have, because he just wasn't very good for the Democrats, and they don't want to help the Republicans, I guess. That's why I think they're going to go for moderate.
I hear you, but would they also be helping themselves? I mean, was this sort of a cutting your own throat kind of exercise to, especially if they're going to talk about how it's so important? But maybe there were because I guess what I'm saying is I think there were a lot of partisan considerations. It was more about let's make a calculation that the Republicans will come out of this looking really bad, rather than. Now, from my perspective, I think Congress is doing more harm than good a lot of times. So I'm just as happy if they're not taking action and they're not unified behind a speaker. But I think from the Democrats, it was a partisan calculation that doesn't redound well on them at all. We've got John, and we've got two callers on. I think we've got John and somebody else, or is it just John? Hey, John, how are you today?
I'm fine. Good morning. Good morning, Hal. Good morning, Arlen.
Good morning.
I just wanted to comment about the House Speaker fiasco. This could be a good thing, because this could be the beginning of a multi-party system. When you have narrow majorities like that, and small factions decide to fracture off because they're not getting their way. And I'm not saying I want Matt Gaetz to get his way, but I'm just saying that this is something that the Squad or the Progressive Caucus should be watching and saying, okay, well, we can be okay with a Hakeem Jeffries speakership, so long as if you want our support, you've got to make a deal with us. If they break the deal, they don't support him again, you know? And so, I mean, it's the next best thing to a multi-party system. And
well, John, I agree 100%. I'm just going to jump in. I want your response, and Arlen's too. 100%. But do we know that there was any conditions placed on Hakeem Jeffries becoming the House Minority Leader? And remember, in 2020, 2021, early, Jimmy Dore and others were saying, force the vote, only agree to vote for Nancy Pelosi. The Progressive Caucus should only agree to vote for Nancy Pelosi if she'll agree to hold a vote on Medicare for all. And they didn't do that. They had some kind of behind the scenes requirements on PAYGO, but no big demands from Pelosi whatsoever. And I think a lot of us are saying, well, why didn't you do this? We see what the Republicans are doing. Do you think that the Republicans are showing the Democrats up, not just showing them the way forward, but showing them what they should have done, pointing out how they should have done this back in 2021? Exactly. John, you go, and then Arlen.
Okay, a precedent has been set. So maybe next time they feel emboldened to do that. Say, this is the new normal. You know, you've got to give us something. You know, and it takes us calling them up and saying, you got to be okay with this. We know that the dysfunction caused by not, you know, a functioning House of Representatives can be, you know, it could be very disruptive. But at the same time, this is how we get the establishment to play ball.
Well, I appreciate that, John. Go ahead, Arlen. And I muted the other caller. We have a second caller. We'll get to you in just a moment. You go ahead, Arlen.
Okay, just real quick. You know, I think that the Democrats have to be, you know, smart about it. And I think most people agree that there should be some more bipartisanship than there is now, because with all these extremes, nothing is getting done about it.
All right. Well, we've got a dog, and we've got another caller from Monterey besides John. Let me bring our other caller on. At least we have a Monterey number. Who do we have on the line?
No caller ID, I take it?
Well, there's a number, but it doesn't say Carl, and I guess you didn't change your phone number from. But I'll see if I can give you a profile. So, go ahead, Carl.
Anyway, my technology, and I'm in Santa Cruz now.
Yes, but you didn't change your number.
I want to mention that. Well, you know, it's always going to revert back to me. I understand. But I did want to address this matter about the Democrats supporting McCarthy, because I'm no pundit. And I'm no politician, and neither are you folks, I can say.
Oh, I am. I'm a pundit. It says so.
Well, that's right. I forgot. All I can see is hell right now.
Yeah, I had to take Arlen off because the video's bad, but we're going to correct that for the next program,
I'm really glad.
Carl.
I thought it was me, Hal. I'm really glad that you cleared that up. But let me not just get lost from what I'm trying to say. McCarthy supposedly made a commitment and promised the Democrats about following through on some budget matters in the future, which have been withdrawn now by the Republicans, and particularly the 8 that are just nihilists. So it's really hard politicians make a lot of ugly choices. Sophie's choice was a lot easier than a lot of these choices these guys have to make, particularly when it comes to supporting one of these. How do you even describe what's going on with the Republicans? So the fact is that to accept McCarthy, you're getting a guy that lies straight to your face. And if you haven't noticed, they lie straight to everybody. And they don't care about the people's work. They want to have the power. And I think that we're really in an interesting what's the flexion point, I think the president called it, because the power is so dispersed right now, because nobody can take it. I mean, Jordan got the votes he got, but when they went behind closed doors, he got creamed. And I'm glad to see that. But that doesn't get the country functioning. And, you know, it just scares me to think that I don't like to get scared. I'm concerned. I'm too old to get scared. The fact is that that we're vulnerable if we don't have a working chance to come together. I mean, 2001, 9/11, that was a terrible thing. I didn't even want to watch. I mean, it's just so horrible to consider it. But the country really came together. Unfortunately, you know, we went over and went to Afghanistan and all that stuff that started. So anyway, that's why the Democrats are not going to support McCarthy. And he's a bad, he's in a way a little more, he's practical at least. He's a smoother politician than these other fire bomb throwers. But it's a sad condition.
All right. Well, I appreciate your call, Carl, very much. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I think we'll move. We're just at the end of the program, but thanks for being part of it. And we'll have more calls tomorrow when I come back, which will be at presumably noon Eastern time live. And then, just you and me. 240-363-7190 if you want to join me then. Arlen, thank you so much again for being part of Halitics. And those who have, are discovering me for the first time, please click subscribe. I just more and more viewers, listeners. We try to really cover the gamut here, A to Z, lots of topics, get your viewpoint on. And hopefully you'll be listening to mine and taking it into account when you make your decision on politics. Arlen, final word from you. Do I have you? I think I lost Arlen. I think Arlen's, we had a little bit of technical issues there with Arlen's video. I'm going to try to work on that after the program. We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow. May have a guest. I'm not certain about that yet. We're still working that out. Otherwise, just you and